Okay. So how many of you have or had mothers? Okay, so more than I expected. I was originally scheduled to give the Dharma talk next week, but I had to be out of town, so Reverend Ginger said I could go this week. Great. Wait, that's Mother's Day. Isn't that supposed to be done by a pro? However, this turn of events did not feel like happenstance. It seemed like the universe was saying, look here. This felt exactly like what I should be looking at right now, the light on the dashboard telling me to pay attention. When I mentioned to Reverend April that I was feeling anxious about this responsibility since I wanted to give a profound and meaningful talk, she said, just to bring yourself. And I took her advice. Today's scripture is from the principle of indebtedness to parents. If we wished most easily to understand the grace we have received from our parents, we first must consider whether our bodies would have appeared in this world without our parents, or even if they had, whether lacking self-power, they could have matured on their own. Anyone would acknowledge that neither would have been possible. If without parents our bodies could not have appeared or matured, then where would there be a grace greater than that? As a rule, although the birth and death of humans may be deemed a natural law and a creative transformation of heaven and earth, the great grace of giving us birth and raising us when we are lacking self-power and teaching us the great principle of the human way is precisely our indebtedness to our parents. Grace, indebtedness, how are we to requite that grace? Requite, an unfamiliar but lovely word, which is often used in our English translation of the original Korean scriptures. Do you remember unrequited love? A love that is not reciprocated or returned. Requited love is one which is appropriately returned. My way to requite a mother's love has been pink fluffy slippers, an electric mixer, or breakfast in bed. But this talk is about my 96-year-old mother who heard Thursday that her closest living friend, Mary, had died. Two beautiful, strong women who had raised their families alongside each other for 75 years. Mary, having decided the quality of her life made it no longer worth living, chose to maintain her dignity when she stopped eating a month ago. The scripture reminds us to recognize the grace we received when we were embodied and then sustained by our mothers with earthly and emotional food. Mary's 6 boys recognized and requited that grace by lovingly surrounding her and supporting her during her month-long ascension into God's love. Helping her maintain her dignity despite her loss of self-power. Lost my spot there. During her month-long ascension into God's loving presence. I too am trying to provide my mother with the grace of helpfulness during her decline and dying, helping her maintain her dignity despite her loss of self-power. But how do I honor that grace while helping her let go of the very body that gave me life? How do I maintain reverence in my connection to her after her physical body is gone? I find it complicated and difficult at times. Fortunately, our Kyominums and Sangha are here to help me preserve a posture of reverence and gratitude. My mom is 96 and lives in an apartment near me. Her health is failing in many ways, which she generally accepts with good humor. Recently, her doctor tested her memory by giving her 3 words to recall. She got 2, but couldn't get the 3rd. The doctor told her it was ball. My mom smiled and replied, "Well, I never did that much with balls." Despite her physical ills, her spirits are good unless she feels lonely. There is still nothing that makes her happier than hearing my knock at her door. After all these years of loving me and caring for me, she doesn't ask for much. However, now that she lacks self-power, there is much that needs to be done. Still, though she has not cooked a meal in years, she always offers to make me something to eat. If I asked her would she like a cookie, she says yes, but only if there's one for me too. She likes to stay in bed till 2 p.m. and reminisce, but if she knows I'm coming over, she will get dressed, brush her hair, and put on lipstick, which sometimes needs a little repair work when I arrive. She doesn't want to be a burden, yet can laugh at her mismatched buttons. She's become so short and bent over that in order to do her buttons, I have to get on my knees. Recently, when I was kneeling in front of her, she patted my head and said, "Yes, I'll marry you." She especially loves to reminisce about old boyfriends, reminding me which ones had asked her to marry. It began to bother me that she talked so much about boyfriends and not about my dad, but finally I just accepted she's in that boyfriend stage. I think she wants to be loved again by that cute little boy whom she now has trouble remembering. But that little boy remembers, being afraid to leave her side. Lacking self-power on the first day of kindergarten, he had to be dragged to his classroom, tugging and crying, trying to escape his fate. The little boy remembers running home after half days at school, and she was there to make his lunch. She, a very young woman. I remember little snapshots, but not the texture of her presence or any sense of the life she was living. I guess she was the air that I breathed, the loving being who took complete responsibility for making sure my little life worked out. A child offers its mother a snail, a stick, or a stone. The mother doesn't care what is offered. She is just happy to be remembered. So why in the world have I held back from feeling and expressing love for my mother? For whom else is my walking in the door the highlight of their day? Why have I taken my mother's love for granted? Why would I hesitate to give her a hug and a kiss, hold her, let her feel the warmth of a body now my dad is gone? Do I really have to be bothered that she wets her pants? After all, I was a 10-pound baby, and I'm probably the reason that she does wet her pants. I used to have this vague sense that there were more important things for me to be doing than looking after my mom. So looking after her could feel like an obligation instead of a privilege, something I had to do instead of something I got to do, guilt instead of joy. Thinking of all the meals she has made for me, how can I feel put upon getting dinner for her, or even watching Fox News with her? What lifetime am I waiting for to get this right? Exactly what is it I think is more important for me to do than loving her, making her final years sweet and gentle, close and not alone? Where does this resistance, this emotional reluctance come from? I think it's partly cultural. Little boys learn early to squirm away when mom tries to kiss them, or at least I did. And it seems to me that many boys and men get the message that being emotional equates to weakness. Thus, the caring, nurturing traits can get suppressed. As I look around to see who's caring for elderly parents, mostly I see women. Even if there is a son, it seems sometimes the daughter-in-law is doing the heavy lifting. Hopefully this is changing. A friend told me this story about his 16-year-old son. His mom couldn't reach his teacher, so she called her son's cell phone. She said, "Hi, sweetie, could you hand your phone to your teacher?" He did, but his mother could hear the other kids teasing, "Hi, sweetie, hi, sweetie." Then she heard her son reply, "So my mom loves me. I'm not ashamed of that." An excerpt from Scripture says, "We are taught to protect the helpless parents of others as if they were our own." Part of finding a way to requite the grace given me by my mother was accepting that my two sisters and I could not do this by ourselves. This pushed me to ask others for help, Reverend Ginger and Sonia. Pushed me to be open to the grace of their giving. But they like to visit Grandma. They don't do it grudgingly. It's easy to see that they enjoy making her comfortable, getting her something to eat, making her not lonely. They were patient with her limitations and understood the reason she didn't recognize them was her failing eyesight. I was with Mom the last time her vision got tested, and she could not see the hugest letter E. This alarmed the technician, who flipped on the light and gave me a worried look. She held her hand right in front of my mom's bad eye and said, "Can you see my hand?" My mom said, "No, but I can see my son in the corner rolling his eyes." It's been good for me to see how much they enjoy her company, but in the end, she is my responsibility. Keeping her place and clothes clean, making sure she has dinner, keeping her hydrated, managing medical problems. So whenever it looked as if these were not being adequately addressed, I felt it was my fault. I felt guilty and resentful and didn't enjoy her company the way her visitors did. In other words, in my effort to be a responsible son, I could be a bit of a jerk. With some reassurance that no one saw me as a neglectful son, I have loosened up, and I don't fret so much about the food on her clothes or her slurred words. I just try to enjoy the chance to be with her and be loving to her. Last week, Reverend April visited her. She said, "Your mom is so sweet. Why don't you live with her?" I said, "Are you nuts?" And I hope she doesn't know that idiom. But Reverend April's tone of voice didn't suggest she thought I was avoiding an obligation. It was more puzzled that I was missing an opportunity. My thinking has been that I want my own life to do the things that are important to me. But maybe I'm missing some important lesson, not seeing the magnitude of the gift on offer. A recent episode brought things into focus for me. My sister had agreed to look after my mom so I could attend our week-long spring retreat in the Blue Ridge Mountains. 2 days before I was scheduled to leave, my mother smashed the end of her finger. I cleaned it up and bandaged it, but the following day it looked worse and needed medical attention. My sister said she had an appointment and scurried out the door. So I missed the first 3 days of retreat taking care of the injury. I thought my sister's behavior was selfish and irresponsible, and I was very angry with her. After a few hours, I was able to calm myself and become grateful for the opportunity to take care of my mother. With me there, her confusion and anxiety subsided. She enjoyed being fussed over. It was sweet and cheerful, less lost in thought and more present. It was a good time together. So, my original plan had been go to the retreat to practice being a calmer, kinder, happier, more understanding person. Instead, the universe gave me the opportunity to actually manifest kindness, patience, understanding, and be happy doing it. Ultimately, I was able to see that my sister had not been selfish and insensitive. She had felt anxious and overwhelmed. My sister, not yet realizing she was a bad person, relaxed once I took care of the mini-crisis and when I didn't complain about missing the start of my retreat. And then she felt able to take over. As a result, I was able to attend the last 4 days of the retreat, and they were the best ever. I was feeling pretty good about my loving tolerance toward my sister's bad behavior. But then the anger bubbled up again, and I realized being tolerant was not enough, because it held within it the judgment that there was bad behavior toward which I could feel superior by being tolerant. In the end, I had to let go of tolerance and accept that my sister was not bad or even wrong, just afraid, confused, and innocent. I felt called upon to surrender my judgment to loving compassion. Once, after watching me do some hard work around the temple, Reverend Wongong cautioned me not to become too attached to being the person who helps and accomplishes things, since that cannot last indefinitely. I responded that I didn't see much point in living beyond the years when I could make a contribution. But she was encouraging me to see the meaning a life can have which is not dependent on accomplishments or ability, anything practical or even personal. She was pointing to the purpose a life can have at its end that was beyond my understanding. So maybe another reason my mom is still with us at 96 is to give me time to learn how to be more loving. Both of us looking for that same little boy. She for love without reservation, me for his innocence. When my sister told my mother that her lifelong friend Mary had decided it was her time to go and that she had stopped eating, my mom was quiet for a while and then said, maybe I should do that. My sister was about to say, Mom, of course not, but instead asked, is that something you think about? My mother paused, then said, no, I love talking to people. Thank you.